What's up, everybody? Welcome back to class. This is the Problem Academy, and today we're going to be talking about something that I mentioned a couple episodes ago that I have been meaning to do, and I knew I was going to do from when I started the podcast. And then we'll transition into a more broader outlook of what I see as like the shifting politics here in America. But I'm sure you can tell, I have the Charlie Kirk freedom shirt on. Pretty much ordered it maybe the day after his assassination, and you know it did shake me to my core that day. Witnessing something like that was just, you know, it- we all remember it. It's going to be written in the history books. That was a major event in our world. But I'm going to try to put into words some things that I felt, and what I was thinking that day. But I'll start with, I actually did write a post that night, probably like right before I went to bed. And I'm going to start off by reading that. So I said, the assassination of Charlie Kirk has been weighing extremely heavy on my mind since the news broke. I wasn't really sure why, to be honest. I was not a huge Charlie Kirk fan, but I respected his willingness to meet with and engage with anyone that wanted to. My opinion of him was always a good man that loved God, his family, and his country beyond measure. He was he was the most influential voice in politics for the younger generations, and he used that influence to further the message of peaceful discourse. I realize now why it shook me to my core to see him slaughtered like he was. Charlie Kirk was the strongest link in the chain, holding back the gates of hell. The left has long since welcomed the dark forces to their side. Antifa, BLM riots, Luigi Angione obsessions, all of that. The right was vigilant in their defense of those dark forces from their side. I believe that fight is lost, and darkness will rise from both sides now. Charlie has said many times, when dialogue ends, violence begins. Today is that day that he fought so hard to prevent. Francoist-style fascism is what we will have to look forward to. And first, I'm going to say I was somewhat wrong in my prediction. Not necessarily, but just where those dark forces actually were. I kind of counted the neocons and the interventionists and all of them, like, I counted them dead and buried. I didn't think they had any place in the right leaning world anymore. I mean, nobody wanted to hear their ideas. We already tried them all. Like, I was convinced they were gone. And the dark forces that I was really talking about was more of like the real alt-right, not the anyone right of center that, the blue-haired feminists all say is alt-right. I'm talking like the real ones, the real, white nationalists, ethnocentric, like, those people. Because you know what, that side had the potential to be absolutely militant. Like, they are organized, they're all well spoken, like, you know, you you think of like the left and they're just screeching barbarians, basically just yelling. How many montages have we seen from the night of Trump's first election with a lady on her knees screaming, and then on college campus when somebody goes to protest abortion or whatever, it's just turns into just screaming and banging things to make sure that they can't be heard. Whereas the right, and that extreme right, is what I felt, could really organize and create a something that's very dangerous. I mean, but again, I was wrong about that. You know what? They kind of Charlie did fight against that group a lot. You would see his videos and his clips and his posts and all that. Him always debating with leftists and stuff, but a lot behind the scenes, and stories that you hear, like, not necessarily from his mouth, but like, about him and how he conducted himself, was in a fight against that side of it. And you know what? I guess he did a great job, because without, he was their number one target as well. I mean, you had to break through that barrier to get to the mainstream, basically. He was the gatekeeper. And without that figure to fight, they seem to have kind of fractured onto all different pieces, and just started infighting amongst themselves. Whereas the neocons, the military industrial complex, all these people, they just picked right up and just moved on forward. They took all the momentum he had and seemed to just let that carry them back into the mainstream, unfortunately. Now, I might have rather the alt right because at least most people don't like their ideas, and they don't have all the support and foundation that the neocon wing of the right has really built up over the years. But, you know, he really did bring a lot of people together, and he really was the most important person in politics. Nobody compared to him. Trump didn't hold a candle to him, even Trump. But his influence with the, let's say, probably 40 and under crowd, the next generation that's going to be teaching their kids their values, he was the number one person for that crowd. Now, obviously, there's the left wingers who hated him, and you saw all the videos of them celebrating his death, but there was nothing to celebrate. Like that, Dave Smith has a part of his podcast where he spoke about it right after it happened. He was talking about the people celebrating, and it was like he was kind of saying the same things that I was in fear of in that post that I made. Where like it's like, what are you saying? Like, you're celebrating his death. Charlie Kirk is the moderate. He's the reasonable person. He could be proven wrong and would correct himself. Whereas, everybody else seems to just plant their flag and will not move. So it was a huge loss for everybody, but especially in the fight against those neocons, because I still think what I believe, and the broader coalition of anti-war and anti-interventionists and America First, that's not just the right wing anymore. That those ideas have won, but the neocons have won the policy. So they do have an expiration date. It's just how far will they drag us before we reach that date? And that's kind of what I want to segue into. You heard stories, and it was confirmed by multiple people now that last summer during the 12-day war, Charlie Kirk was the only person in the White House, and he was the person that stopped that from getting to any bigger of a conflict. I mean, he was in Trump's ear constantly, telling him, do not escalate any further. First he tried to stop them from doing anything and joining in on the attack. And then once the decision was made to do that, then it was like, all right, well, just, hit those sites and get out. Don't look to further anything else. And, Trump did really respect him, respect his views and, in his mind. He was a smart man. I mean, and, we lost a huge person, a huge influence on our side. And you know what? I mean, I don't know what to think of his assassination. I'm not ready to believe the official story, but I really haven't been convinced of an alternative yet. I mean, I know it will always be hard to prove if there is a conspiracy, but what I do know is that those people who now have won policy decisions, they have no problem killing. So I would not put it past them if they wanted to. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of influence in war. And, you can look at it as multi-billion-dollar corporations. Many of them lost out on a lot of money. All these politicians lost out on a lot of lobbying dollars. All these foreign leaders lost out on their lifelong goals. And you know what? People have killed for a lot less. So that's all kind of dive into that portion of it. But, just that they're not above taking people out who stand in their way of profit and power. But you know what? His influence and his opposition was actually it was a sign of the broadening of what's being called now the America First movement. And I just kind of want to show a clip of him speaking about the Iran war and, at both sides of the Republican Party. I'm going to show that now.
Let's do some updates about Israel and Iran and potentially the United States. On one side is the Lindsey Graham, John Bolton types, where they are actively calling for regime change. Here is Lindsey Graham. This is just lunacy. This kind of analysis is not helpful. This kind of approach, this kind of argument, it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons at this point. This is now that we want to go all in and take out the regime. But what have we learned when it comes to wars, and especially wars in the Middle East? What you draw up on a whiteboard rarely happens. What you think theoretically is going to occur, there might be unintended and unforeseen consequences, especially when you're talking about a country 2.5 times the size of Texas. It has 90 million people and was an ancient and great power with well over a dozen ethnic groups. You have underground Christians. You don't really have many Jews left in Persia. But also you have secular younger Persians. Who's going to run the country exactly, Lindsey Graham? This sounds like Hillary Rodham Clinton. Typically in the Mideast, it's very messy, creates a quagmire, and then there is civil war. Do you understand how large Iran is? It's massive. It's a very big country. It's mountainous. It makes Afghanistan and Iraq look like a cakewalk. Just look, the other extreme is one that I have deep respect and reverence for, because I actually think if we had that other extreme, we would not have invaded Iraq. This other extreme is philosophically important. It's important to consider, and that's the Ron Paul extreme. And I love Ron Paul. Ron Paul is awesome. I would have Ron Paul on the show regularly. He is a hero because Ron Paul had the courage to challenge old sacred cows of the Republican Party. He made people defend the indefensible. But the Ron Paul perspective is strictly isolationist. I actually agree with a lot of this other extreme. A lot. I think it's healthy to have this other extreme more than the neoconservative extreme, because this extreme has been underrepresented in the public dialogue and discourse the last 20 years. So you have these two extremes. I honestly don't think the neoconservative extreme needs to be represented philosophically anymore. It's uninteresting to me. They've done a mess of Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, the entire Middle East, Ukraine. We know what the neoconservatives believe. I do think, hearing out, and honestly, I agree with a lot of the more, I think isolationist is used as a pejorative, but let's just say restrained community. Take out the Ayatollah. Resist that temptation. That's not prudence. That's not self-control. That's something else talking. That's a zeal. And that very same zeal got us involved in a pile of garbage in Iraq. It all felt good with shock and awe in March of 2003. We're unstoppable. We're going to take Iraq in a weekend. Turns out, it didn't work that way. A lot of people died. A lot of Americans died unnecessarily.
Full disclosure, I might have just wanted to show that clip because of all of the praise he gave to Ron Paul, who is, he's my absolute hero. And, he's the thought leader that I followed first and who really got me into all this anti-interventionist and all that stuff. So to hear, Charlie Kirk praise him like that was, always puts a smile on my face. But, getting into it though, like trying to define what America First is, because it started really as a right-wing, like populist movement, almost from the alt-right, actually. Like a lot of them were dubbed it that name, and they are still part of it somewhat, but so are some left-wingers, because it's such a broad and I think just common sense way of looking at what we need as a country. So, to kind of just put it straightforward, for me, what I think it means is like, it means putting Americans and its citizens and sovereignty first above anything else. There's no more needless foreign wars that we spend trillions and trillions of dollars on. We send our troops, we send our young men to die overseas, or they come back and they have PTSD and they have all these medical issues and we can't even afford to take care of them. Their homelessness among veterans is outrageous for what we ask them to do for this country, and then to come back and just have thousands and thousands of them living on the street without the care that they need. And it's not just war, it's also these international trade deals that all these multinational corporations that they lobby for them and they exploit them so that they take out jobs from Americans and they ship them overseas and just exploit that cheap labor over there while ripping apart, unskilled labor jobs here in America, and they just get rich off of it. And now it sounds like a degrading term, the unskilled labor, but that is a huge part of the health of a nation. And we all can't be doctors and physicists and this and elites and professors, whatever. There is a portion of this country that, for whatever reason, economics and culture and whatever, like they can't reach those heights as quickly and as easily as others. So you need these unskilled positions for them. You need a factory worker. It's sort of the story of immigration in America. You know, the immigrants come over and they get terrible jobs. Excuse me. They get these terrible jobs, you know, just shoveling horse shit off the streets of Manhattan. But they do that and they work hard and they give their kids a little bit better of a life. And then those kids go on to do a little bit more. And that's how a community and the nation grows. So now it might sound bad that, not everybody can be these elite, you know, professions, but that's also necessary. You need that. Otherwise, those people who can't reach those heights have nothing. And when you have nothing, you have no pride, that degrades your soul. A man without a goal, without a direction, without a quest before him is just, you feel lost. That's what drives us. So not having at least something even if it's as simple as that, I'm going to go pull this lever all day, but you know what? I'm doing it to feed my family, to feed my kids, to get them clothes for school. Men need a purpose, but again, it's all these elites that just ship this stuff over. We call them the Epstein elites. You know, they're all hanging out on that island, all flying on that plane. Hanging out in the ranch in New Mexico. Those people. That's who America First is really up against. And, another major thing is securing the border. It might sound, it's kind of like how the neocons convinced the Republican and the right wing that going to war was a right wing position, where that was always, the anti-war, anti-interventionist was always a right wing position. You look at Pat Buchanan, Eisenhower, classically right wing American politicians were always anti interventionist. It's once these neocons came in and they were able to just convince the right wing that being pro war is right wing. And it never was. What is conservative about spending trillions of dollars and sending out your sons to die for a foreign nation? That does nothing to conserve. But it's same thing with, these open borders. They've convinced the left wing that open borders is a left wing position, where it's not. It never was. You look at Bernie Sanders in this first presidential run early on, and he was saying that it's, open borders is a Koch brothers conspiracy to flood the job market with all these extra people. And basic supply and demand. You have a larger supply of workers that decreases the price. So it's to keep wages down. You import all these people to keep wages low, again, for these corporations. So, it's all about policies that help everyday Americans in their day-to-day lives. And it's, talked about it in our first episode, the degradation of our culture. There's no, like the term, American is apple pie. That's not a thing anymore. We don't have that. We've lost that. Our food supply is nothing but poison. All these corporations just pump into us. And then, you look at even pharmaceutical companies, talk about anybody that's around my age knows it, saw it there firsthand, that opioid epidemic. And FDA said that I was, all these opioid medications were, they were non-habit forming. That's the FDA said that. because they were getting money from all these pharmaceutical companies. The Sackler family is the one that had OxyContins, and that's what really kicked it off. As a little side note, my own little conspiracy theory was that we left Afghanistan because fentanyl became readily available. And just hear me out. This is a quick little segue. So before we went into Afghanistan, they were a food exporter. Once we got in there, all these farmers just started growing nothing but poppy. There's it's a fact now that our soldiers were guarding these poppy fields because the Taliban outlawed it. So, we were there for a long time. What were we really doing there? The Taliban came right back. My theory is that, we were really there for all these pharmaceutical companies after a while to get their supply of, the poppy opium. But, once fentanyl, which could be made in a lab, became readily available, and it was pretty much the same thing. And it was like, well, there's no need to be there anymore. And that's why we got out. I have no proof, just so we're clear. I have proof that we were guarding the poppy fields and all that, but I have no proof that fentanyl was part of the decision making. But anyway, let me get back to it. It's all about what helps Americans in their day-to-day lives. Grocery prices, better schools. Our healthcare system is an absolute joke. Our insurance is, it's $1,000 a month for insurance here in New York for some people. These are consequences of all of these policies that have done nothing but enrich the elites at our expense. It's not about isolating us from the world. I'm a free trade person. I like free trade. But they perverted it so much that it was like hurtful to have your factories here in America. So we have to do something. Again, we just, talk about what this uniparty, these elites have given us, and it's, trillions of dollars on war, crumbling infrastructure here in America. We give billions and billions of dollars to overseas, to Ukraine, and Israel, Egypt, Pakistan, Africa, all these countries, we throw all of the money over there. Well, meanwhile, inflation over here is skyrocketing, causing all these housing bubbles and all this. It's just, they've just sold us out for their own pockets. And, it's simple to see why too, because you look at all these Congress people, all these politicians, and it's just literally like, all right, they leave Congress, they go work for this weapons manufacturer or this lobbying firm, and then they work there for a while, and then they get moved into like a think tank so that they start writing policies that then the lobbyists then give to the politicians, and then they kind of switch back in. So it's just like literally a revolving door of all these different positions that are just nothing but corruption. Because then they're all friends, So what is a voter? What hope does an average voter have to reach that person when they got their friends throwing money at them, who have a direct line to them? You call your congressman's office and you speak to some secretary who's going to maybe just kind of tally you and, this where another person called today about this policy that they don't like. So I'm going to give it to this congressperson's aide, and maybe they'll kind of give the message to the congressperson. We don't have any hope if we're fighting a system like that. But a lot of people are seeing it now, and a lot of people are waking up to it. I am a right-wing libertarian. I believe in ultimate freedom. I'm pretty much as close to an anarchist as you can get. And, I'd be willing to sacrifice now a lot of my strong principles if we were able to bring something back to the American people, to help the American people. Like you look at people like Tucker Carlson, who I love Tucker Carlson. I think he is a genuine person, and I think he wants what's best for America. I absolutely love him. There's a lot of his economic policies that I disagree with. He's a very protectionist, when it comes to economics. Whereas I'm more free trade, deregulation, free trade. But he makes a lot of good points about crumbling infrastructure, the crumbling of our culture, of our dignity. And I think that has a lot to do with it. And then again, I bring him up all the time, but Dave Smith was pretty much kind of right on track. I'm right on track with him. I was gonna say he's on with me, but I have to give deference where it's due. He's radical libertarian, anti-interventionist. Then you got a few others on the right. Quickly, Daryl Cooper is one of them. He does more of a history podcast, but he does a lot of politics too. And he's a very like Tucker is a right winger conservative, but like Daryl Cooper is like the classic conservative, like the the Eisenhower, the square dad in like the 1950s show, like that's him. But he's his big thing is against the neocon war policy, because he's a veteran, and then he was a contractor afterwards for a few years, and he saw firsthand what these wars did to people. And there was one story I remember him telling about. I think it was Trump's first term or the end of Obama's, but he was a contractor working with the U.S. Navy, and this was at like the height of the civil war in Yemen, where it was basically a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And I mean, it was the worst humanitarian crisis that I think even to this day, I've heard of. I mean, like malaria was wiping out thousands and thousands of people. Yeah. And like he told a story about, they had a blockade basically around Yemen. They didn't want either side, the United States didn't want the Iranian side, the Houthis, to get any supplies. So you had people like on the other side in like Oman, not Oman, sorry, and from like Egypt and like the Africa, kind of like getting on these little dinky speedboats to try to get like just medicine, like Tylenol, and like just so that these kids wouldn't die of diarrhea. Like that's all it was like Tylenol and these like over the counter medications that people kind of gathered up to try to smuggle over to give to the people who were literally just, I mean, to be a little graphic, diarrhea was so bad because of the malaria and the disease, and they didn't have the nutrition that they would just literally just go until they died, from dehydration and all that. And the U.S. Navy was stopping these boats and dumping all of that stuff into the water rather than letting it get to the people that needed it. That was our policy. So that's kind of where he comes from. You got more of the cultural, Candace Owens, who, I mean, she's a little bit out of her mind, but actually, I love Candace. When she's on somebody, she's a mad dog. She doesn't stop. Some things are a little out there, but I gotta say, she brings her receipts more often than not. And then, I mean, the best person in Congress right now, Thomas Massey. He's always voting. He always votes against a bill that will raise spending. He's always voting against interventions around the world. He is by far the best congressperson we have right now. And you know what? He got the Epstein files released. So everybody owes him a big debt of gratitude for that. And, she was a little crazy in the beginning as well, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, she really came around to, non-interventionist because, and she wasn't coming it from the same place that like Daryl Cooper was, or I come, it was, let's take care of our people first, and then we'll go fight the monsters overseas. But right now we got monsters at home. Megyn Kelly is another one who, I always liked her on Fox. I'd never, there was maybe 60% that I disagree with her about, but I always liked her. Yeah, maybe I had a little crush on her back when I was like 17 watching her on Fox News, but now she's still come around to have these good positions. But it's not just the right wing. The left wing as well has really, parts of it have it really embraced the America first policy. You just look kind of at what Massey did with the Epstein files, and he made a major push for the war powers being rescinded from Trump. And he teamed up both times with Congressman Ro Khanna, who I really like him. Now, about 80% of his policies I really don't like, but I see him as somebody who is working for the American people. Elizabeth Warren, she has great sound bites. She's not working for the American people. She's working for herself and her donors. AOC, same thing. I mean, she shouts about all this and that every time a military aid package or money for Israel or Ukraine goes somewhere, comes up. Oh yeah, she votes yes. So, it's not the leading figures of the left that really are the America First part, but I think they are a lot of the, bubbling up underground, not so much underground, but, they're rising to prominence. Another one who I always say now, who I used to mock endlessly, is Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks. She has when Trump was first elected in 2016, there was a whole meltdown at the Young Turks. You can YouTube that. It was actually pretty hilarious to watch. But like she has like a thing, she's like, it's not that I just don't respect women who voted for Trump. I think they're fucking dumb, like, just insulting and like, everybody was a Nazi. And then, you know what? Past few years, she's slowly kind of come around. She had an incident with, like, where she said that she didn't want to be called a birthing person. And the mob just piled on her. The left wing radicals, it just piled on her about that. And it was like, oh, she kind of fought that. She did fight back, but it was kind of like a little bit of an eye opening. And then she had she was like groped or something like that by a homeless man. She lives in LA and like something like that. I think she was walking her dog. She like bent over to pick up, the dog's poop. And like the guy like grabbed her from like behind and like basically like dry humped her. And then him and his friend like laughed about it. Like, that really kind of killed the whole abolish the police thing with her. And she said that. And again, they piled on. So she's kind of come around to, again, she's kind of like Rokana, where she's very socialistic, policies for economics and stuff like that. But, she's anti-war, and I truly believe she's somebody who cares about the American people. And that's the only thing that matters. I can argue with you if you don't, if I really believe that you're trying to better the average person, make their life better. We can argue about, facts, numbers, this policy or that policy, but at least I know you're coming from a good place. And, the divide now is really the Epstein elite uniparty against, America First, people looking out for the average Americans. You look at other people on the left, you got like Jimmy Dore, who he's a little bit out there, he's a comedian, he's a podcaster and stuff, but him and, you know, he was right on that Epstein stuff from the start. He was, propping up Thomas Massey, and he wasn't afraid to call out the left side who was trying to cover it up. Like when AOC would do her show of like, oh, I'm a democratic socialist, I care about the people, blah blah blah, and then just turn right around and vote for the uniparty interest. He was always quick to call them out, and that's all that matters. Just be honest and be for the American people. Yeah, and we can argue about it. I love arguing. Anybody who knows me knows I love arguing. But if we're not arguing to make America better, then why would I even waste my time? You know what? There's a few other on the left. Cenk Uygur, also from the Young Turks. He's slowly, he's coming around a little bit. I've just seen a lot more from him, kind of playing the sleazy politics game. Where again, I'm coming around on him, but I'm a little bit more hesitant with him. He threw a lot of his friends, even on the left, under the bus, like once they kind of went against him a little bit. So, but since, at the election, he vowed that he was going to play nice, with Republicans and the right wingers, and he pretty much has. He's gone on Tucker and a few other right wing podcasts and stuff, and you know what? It's always nice to hear those conversations because you don't want to just hear your echo chamber. You want to hear both sides. And, you know what? It's that side is really growing. And so that's kind of what shows me that it's a shift because those people are more popular on the left than ever. And I mean, you look at Tucker, you look at Megyn Kelly, you look at Dave Smith, you look at all these people, even Piers Morgan. I mean, he's not American, but his politics have shifted now. You know, if you watch his show, it's like the Jerry Springer of political debate shows. You know, it's very entertaining, but you don't really get a lot of substance from it most of the time. But it's important because you need to get some of these people in the arena to try to defend these points that are indefensible, really. But then at least they're put up on a widely known named show, and they're exposed. Then you also have the third wing, I would say. It's like, they kind of like Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, Tim Dillon, like these guys, they're comedians and like people like them who aren't political in their day-to-day lives. And Tim Dillon he's shifted a lot towards that, but he's still a comedian and a culture type of guy. But you look at his show and he just, he's killing these people, these neocon, the uniparty elites that he's just killing them every day. And he does it so hysterically. Like, I think everybody should watch Tim Dillon because he does it so funny and he's so smart that he knows what he's talking about too. I don't want to disparage him, but like Theo Vaughn, he's kind of like an average, never really paid much attention, but he's just been exposed to it and he's interested. So and his heart is in a good place. You see it. He was really upset about all these things that was happening in Gaza and all that. And, with the war now. So he's another one who's now trying to just speak the truth, because he's saying like, why are we doing this? It's not helping the American people at all. And again, Rogan, who's just, he's the most popular podcaster in the world for the reason that, like I said, I always said he's popular because he's smart enough to understand almost every topic, but he doesn't know enough that when and he knows he doesn't know enough. So it's just a curious mind who is able to comprehend something, just prodding all these people for more information on it. And that's what I love about it because you're learning along with him because his question that he asks, this astrophysicist or whoever is the same question I would ask. Explain this to me. I don't get this. You say that the universe is expanding, but then there's the limit to the universe. How can it be, something like that? The universe is this large, but it's expanding. So what's outside of it? Somebody smarter than me, explain that to me, please. Because I kind of get what you're saying, but I don't understand it. And that's kind of where Rogan is. And, he's always been more of a left-wing person, but he didn't fit the left wing's aesthetic. He's a MMA guy that, goes hunting and loves guns and this and that. But then he's for universal health care. And I think for a little while, I don't know if he changed it, was for a universal basic income. So he's all over the place, but that he wants what's best for the American people. And then you got the show is called Breaking Points. It's Crystal Ball and Sagar Angetti is his name. And I love Sagar too. He's extremely smart, where it's kind of he's more right leaning and she's left leaning. And, they always kind of just go head to head on everything every day. And that's, again, it's good to see because it's all in good faith. I like to see these good faith conversations where I'm not looking for, oh, I got you. Oh, you made a mistake. I'm going to kill you on this. Oh, you slipped up and you said this. No, I want to be able to have a conversation where I say something dumb and then you call me on it and I'll just be like, oh, yeah, no, you're right. I'm going to take that back. All right. Yeah. Let me try to clear up what I would. Those are what's important. The gotcha and the out of context things to try to make somebody look bad or stupid or whatever it is, like, that's not good for us. That's the degradation of our culture. I wanna be able to tell somebody, "No, you're wrong about this. Here, look at this here." And they go, "You're right." Alright, well, let me change up how I think about it right now. I'll come back to you even, with this new information. Now I have to go back and think about this. May not change the position, but at least I'm gonna go think about it. Or have somebody call me out and correct me. That's fine with me. Like I said, I love arguing because I always try to argue in good faith. I never try to debate somebody as a gotcha and just beat them down. Like, no, let's argue about this. I look at it as almost like a sport. Let's argue about these things. And, just go head to head. And when you call me on something and I don't have an answer for it, you know what? It makes me better because then, you know what? Either you're right and you taught me something, or I don't fully understand this thing that I've been saying. So now I have to go back and I have to read more. I have to watch a video. I have to do this. That's what heals us as a country. It's not the gotchas, it's not the out of context clips. And that's kind of what I'm seeing with this America First movement. Like I said, Chank and Anna and all these people and Dave Smith and they're all kind of crossing over platforms now, and they have been for about a year or so, maybe a little bit before the election, maybe even. But even Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirk went on the Young Turks a few times before, and it was always good because he always approached things in a good faith way. Maybe not in the beginning, you his start, but again, I think he started when he was like 22 years old. So, you're a little bit more of a hothead then. But as, he got to his late 20s and stuff, he really kind of approached everything in good faith. Actually, one of the things I never saw it before his death, just to kind of go back to praising him a little bit, was if you've ever heard of the Whatever podcast. It's, I mean, it's slop. It's this one guy, and they'll usually have like another like conservative guy or woman, and then just surround the table with, like OnlyFans models and these dumb 19-year-old, 20-year-old girls, and like try to call them out on their shit. And like, it's all gotcha. Like I was saying, somehow, some way they got Charlie Kirk on there. There's prominent people that have gone on there for whatever reason, but I recommend everybody go and watch that because that was actually the girls tried as hard as they could to bait him into either getting mad or being a righteous Christian right winger, like, and he was just so nice about everything, and it felt genuine. you know I don't know if he spoke about it before. Like I said, I didn't watch everything that he did, but I know, like, at one point he said on that podcast, like, he had a problem with pornography when he was younger. Never looked into it further, so I don't. But then one of the girls was like, "Oh, did you ever masturbate to me?" And then, I think he just turned to her and said, I truly believe that God put you on this earth to do more, with the skills that you're given, more something greater than just showing your body online. I think there's a better plan for you, and I think God has it for you, whatever it was. He's like, I'm going to pray for you. That was his response to a girl trying to bait him on a serious issue that he had, that he kind of admitted. It was like an addiction or something. So again, that's how you should approach everything. I never try to get. And believe me, I'm guilty. I get angry when I argue with people sometimes, but it's when it's usually when like I said, oh, look, this here is the information. It's proving you wrong. Your point is incorrect. You're operating from an incorrect position. And well, no, that's not true. It's like, what? No, I just showed you. Just showed you 4 different sources. That's when I get angry because now you're lying to me. But Again, going back over the thing, like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of those arguments. There's going to be a lot of those debates and stuff. But these flashpoints in it are only going to make it a stronger movement. Because, like, what I said once this war started, again, I'm a libertarian. I'm as close to an anarchist as you can get, pretty much. Give me free healthcare. Give me universal healthcare. Give me childcare paid for by taxes. Give me all of these programs. Bring the troops home. I will take all of those. Bring the troops home. Stop these endless wars. Cut the foreign aid to everybody. I'll compromise that. If we can get that done, whatever. I mean, healthcare is a hellhole right now anyway. But, give me all those programs. Take care of the American people, at least try to, instead of taking care of the rest of the world and killing the rest of the world and doing whatever that's, to me, is America first. And you know what? It's only going to grow bigger because we can't sustain this the way it's been. Like I said, the neocons have an expiration date. The Uniparty has an expiration date. You look at polls, and that's the way young people are shifted. I think it was CNN the other day. Even I wish we were talking about Iran war and all that. I understand why Israel had to do it. And then I just saw something earlier, actually, that supposedly they might have threatened to nuke Iran this time. Under Obama, they threatened to do the same thing that they threatened Trump, to attack them and then get our bases attacked. But supposedly there's a report that they threatened to nuke them this time to really get Trump to jump. I don't know if that's true or not, but they have an expiration date as well. Their support from Americans. I think 49 and under, even like Republicans. I think it's like 57% do not support Israel, and that's Republicans. Left wing, it's like 85, 90%. So these policies do have an expiration date, and it's up to us to kind of steer it back home. So that's where we're at, like just kind of wrap it up with the big pictures. Like, it's not just a few fringe people, like Nick Fuentes, even, who again, most of his views, he's that alt-right figure. He's one of those people that I was really worried about, coming to power, but he's also one of if not the most talented person in that whole podcaster sphere. He's brilliant. He's ruthless. He's funny. And we all have to kind of step up to be able to guide this movement, not in that direction fully. And, hopefully the left side steps up and kind of pulls it to the middle a little bit more. But, the right wing has to give up some things. Like I said, I'd be willing to give up, and the left wing has to really give up on some things as well. Open border it's a non-starter. We can't do that. Some of these, some of this, the woke, like gay, trans, and this kind of stuff, like they got to ease off, man. Listen, gay marriage, I don't think government has a business in marriage at all. But you know what? Nobody should be withheld from the benefits of marriage because of their preference. So, but I also, you hear about the drag queen story hour and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I don't want that either. That falls into cultural decay. Like why do you need a drag queen reading to my kid? To these, these young kids? Why do you got to teach about genders and non-binaries to fourth graders? Like, ease up. You won your marriage equality. I think most people, and I'm sure everybody in the America First movement, if once you're 18, you want to be trans, I don't care. Do what you want to do. I may not call you the pronouns that you want. I'll try, but, might slip up. It's not a crime to do that. Stop trying to make it a crime. Leave the kids alone. Don't put them on hormones. Don't put them on, don't do these surgeries. And now the right wing also, you know what? They have a lot to compromise as well. So that's where we're going to have to meet, just to help each other out and to help fellow citizens out. All right. Well, I think that's it for class, everybody. Thank you for coming. Have a good day.